define Judaism for us?
I think Judaism across the board believes and embraces the ideal that peace is of ultimate value, and that we do everything we can to seek peace. There's a very famous saying that we have.
There was some media, talk like that the Muslims, or somehow in the mosque or the Muslim, they were teaching actually in textbooks their children to hate Jews.
Islamic studies, it's not a part of the faith of Islam to say, well, who you hate and who you love. It's not a part of the faith at all. It is really one of the necessary things when you live as a minority for Muslims in the non-Muslim environment or societies. That is, you have to act like an ambassador of your religion, and you have to represent it in the right way. In this case, I don't think you can say, well, I can do this with hate. We cannot. No way at all. Well, if someone, I don't know actually anybody who teaches this to say, well, there is subject or there is something in the Muslim schools saying, well, hate those people.
So all the three holy books believe and say that turn the other cheek. And how could the world be in such a chaos if religions weren't the cause of this? I mean, it's so much differences, people like so much hatred and discrimination going on. I mean, why can't we get along? I mean, I would love for you to comment on that.
Well, I think people misinterpret the teachings of Muhammad, they misinterpret the teachings of Christ, and I don't know enough about the Jewish religion to I must learn more. I think people misinterpret the religious message. I felt this when I was in the States covering the US election campaign, and I visited the fundamentalist church, Christian fundamentalist churches in Ohio, and it was very interesting. The very strong Republican, intolerant message we're getting from the preachers. It wasn't anti-homosexual. I found the kind of gay bashing thing I found extremely hard to stomach. I found the message about the Iraq War very difficult to stomach, and you sensed that this was a political machine, and this was part of the motivation. And this religious fundamentalism was being used by Karl Rove, the ghastly, terrible, I think, man who advises George Bush on his political strategy as a way of getting back into power. And I think this mixing up of religion and politics, which is a feature of pre-modern societies. It was a feature of the Crusades, as I was talking about in Britain, or the feature of the Wars of the Reformation, where you mix up with disastrous effects fairly primitive religious emotions and political action.
What do you think about the current affairs and Bush declaring war on Iraq?
Bush's decision to declare war on Iraq is a complicated one to answer, because I think the primary purpose of your documentary is to discuss religion and its influence on war, or how politicians and political leaders have used religion to serve their purpose to declare war or inflict violence on other people. John Lennon has been referred to numerous times as a man who speaks for peace and a proponent of acceptance, understanding, and oneness with the world. Can I imagine a world with no religion, with the words that John Lennon used, not one religion? No religion, I can't imagine a world with no religion. I can imagine a world with no September 11th. I can imagine also a world where there's no Palestinian-Israeli conflict because there's no religious difference between people. I can imagine a world with no Northern Ireland conflict with Great Britain for hundreds of years and the death and destruction that followed. I can imagine a world where the Pakistanis now and the Indians had not slaughtered each other in numbers, or Croatians, Muslims, Serbians killing each other and massacring each other in numbers. I can imagine a world with no crusades, and as they say, the bloods of Jerusalem flowed through the streets of Jerusalem, or the streets of Jerusalem flowed with blood due to the crusaders and their the putting to death of everyone within those city walls. I can imagine a world where people are more accepting of each other and find one less reason to hate and kill each other. And religion has obviously been a very big cause of much of the world's death and destruction, as well as greed that goes along with it. Your question is a good one and an excellent one, and I hope one day that human beings will live more up to the dream of John Lennon.
What's your opinion on the war in Iraq?
My position on Iraq, due to a job that I had in the Pentagon back in the mid-90s, I was in the Pentagon between 94 and 98. I actually worked in an organization that was called Weapons Requirements, and part of my job was to develop new weapons. And one program that we started while I was in the Pentagon was a program called Agent Defeat Weapon. Now, Agent Defeat Weapon was primarily going to be used to neutralize weapons of mass destruction, chemical and biological weapons. Because of that background, we were given all kinds of intelligence data of all the countries that possessed weapons of mass destruction. We knew at the time, up until late 90s, that Iraq was very highly unlikely that they possessed any weapons of mass destruction. The weapons inspectors were on the ground in Iraq at the time, Scott Ritter being one of them that's fairly well known, who I've become to know in my recent months. I've gotten to meet Scott Ritter, and we both agree that there was little to no evidence that weapons of mass destruction were in Iraq at the time. When I heard that we were getting ready to invade Iraq back in the late 2002, I was pretty much appalled that this was being allowed to happen. I knew that we were being lied to. I knew that the evidence was very specific, that they didn't have any, and the urgency to invade Iraq was obviously a miscommunication deliberately given to the American population to get them to rally to war. I feel insulted and I feel offended that my military was put in a spot of harm's way, and my son ended up participating in military operations that have been going on since 1979, essentially, in the Middle East.
What do you think about the statements which is both made, Bush, our president, and Tony Blair? They both used God name to say that God told them to send the soldiers to Iraq. What do you think about that statement?
I think that the power of the moment is so strong that when two or more people are together and one has an epiphany and says, well, God says I should go into Iraq, and another person said, well, God said that yes, we should go into Iraq, that are we really listening to God?
How do you view the statement that most wars has been based on religious differences?
I believe that wars are based on religious differences. That there has been more deaths and more wars that has been conducted by the religious people throughout our whole era of history. War and religion goes hand in hand. Here again, I do believe that religion can be a great part in building peace around this world also, rather than